Okay, ready. Right and low. Half target right, 2 3/4 targets low. Tall. Half a target right, 1.5 targets tall. Oh, just off right edge, 3 o'clock, 1/4 target right.
You don't need much more accuracy.
Yeah. Right and low. 1 target low, half target right.
That dust is there. Good.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's really ripping away, isn't it? Right and low. Half target right, 3/4 target low.
Not bad. There's 5. 3.
Right and low. Half target low, 3/4 target right. Tall, top left. Level the left edge of plate, half target tall.
That's pretty much where I adjusted to.
Yeah, okay.
The wind's varying a little bit, I think.
Yes, yes.
It's really our problem at the moment.
Yep. Bottom left. 1/4 target low, 1/4 target left. That was close.
It was, isn't it? And
Yeah.
The dust is very light, very fast.
Yep.
Very light.
Yep.
That was holding top right.
Top left. 1/4 target tall, half target left.
That felt good, shot good.
Oh, just off bottom left. Oh man, that was close.
G'day, welcome to Mark and Sam After Work. Today I just want to do a little interlude, a little halfway session on how we're going with this 416 Barrett in front of us. For those that don't know what I'm up to here, well, I'm setting up a 416 and try and make it shoot well at ultra long range. I'm doing that for a couple of reasons. One, I have this chassis rifle action set up for my 50 BMG. So what I actually have in front here, on the other side there, I have my 50 BMG round, which I've just about developed. This is a custom bullet that we've made in here, and hopefully this year we'll get to where we can finish testing it and get some hits on steel out at ultra long range with a 50 BMG round. So that's what this rifle was set up for. It was running a true flight barrel Everything else pretty much the same with the Barnard action, the Dolphin chassis, the mods I've made to it, my custom bipod, all the bits and pieces, and we're doing that. We had to make some more custom bullets and we ran out of season last year, so that's what we're doing. But in the interim, let's put that one away, I decided what would be nice to do a little bit for my own R&D, a little bit of using this platform in probably even a more precision way, would be to set up a 416, which is what we've got here. So it's a 416 Barret. We've already done some testing with some of the normal contenders, so some cutting edge bullets, some other Lehigh bullets, some other basic bullets to go through of what I could get. It's fairly difficult for me to get them over here in Australia in that size, but what I could get in the way of good quality bullets to shoot at range, so then I can start to set it up and make it all make sense. So that's what I'm up to. Then the next bit that goes with that is, I should say with that, this is the 36-inch Lothar Walther barrel that we have in here, which is all starting to come in, all starting to settle down. There was a little bit of the way it was set up, there was a little bit that had to run in more than normal. That seems to be working properly. Haven't got to that place yet, but that's the one thing that's really changed in this equation. Same muzzle brake, same everything else. Except I suppose the other thing I've done is moved this custom bipod, which is something that, for those who don't know, this is actually set up on a bearing block, so it actually slides backwards and forwards. You set it up, when it goes bang, it slides back. I have the little studs taken out of these bipod feet, but they have feet that they have little studs in them that plant them to the ground. So it is still in a semi-tactical form. This is the rifle you could carry there. It's heavy, it's just over 40 pounds, so it is a heavy rifle, but it is still just a rifle. It's not set up on skids, it's not set up in an F-class form, it's set up to be able to plonk down in the dirt as you see us shooting it. So listen, that was part of it, was using this really good platform just with a different barrel. The other part was in doing my R&D, and I suppose I'd much rather, as much as I can possibly push myself to do it, I'd much rather have the experience to be able to give advice or to be able to make conclusions on things, that sort of stuff. I'd much rather have been there and done that and played that game rather than just read the books and made my mind up on things. So part of that means, even though I have a rifle that I've already done the research and really pushed the buttons in the paperwork side of things and tested very thoroughly, which is the 375 Gibbs I shoot, which is a 375 ERA-TAC improved. It's actually the DCM chamber. That one there is what I've pushed the boundaries on, worked really well, shot out the 5Ks, almost hit our target out there. When we get good weather, we have to go and finish that job and hit our 24-inch steel, but really performed in a level which already shows me we were right in the right place to do that side of things. But there's a lot of people using the 416. There's very simple logics to go with using the larger bullet. It's a bigger bullet, hits the ground harder, out there, shows up more dust, it's easier to see. And I suppose there's also the comments that you would see, the military stuff from Barret and that side of things that pretty much talk about it like a laser beam, that it was so much more accurate, so much more percentage of hits and all that sort of stuff. And there's some logic to that, but is it all true? Is it all what it seems to be? I would say no, but I'm doing the hard yards to get out there and actually see what I can do, all in reference to that. This is what I can do with it, with my skill level and with my abilities and techniques and that sort of stuff, what I can get it to do. So that's what I'm up to. Not much of a nutshell, I get it, a bit complicated, but listen, that's what I'm actually doing. And we're also being very time poor, taking big steps in great giant leaps to try and get to this place with as little of the in-between testing as possible, simply because we have other things to do, other rifles to shoot, and lots of paying the bills and doing a normal job as well. So where are we at for this little lot? Well, the test that we did today was out shooting, stepped out to our ultra long range, so just over 2 miles. 3,718 yards is what our 24-inch plate was set up at. Wind was a little bit higher than it's supposed to be. It was supposed to be no clouds, and it was supposed to be 8 k's an hour or 5 miles an hour in wind. Well, they got that wrong, in both scores. We had clouds to start the day, which we managed to work with. You'll see the light varies a little bit through the video. And we had wind that was up in the 15 to 20 miles an hour, so pushing fairly hard. I was actually running 32 minutes of left windage to correct the wind over that shot. And then I'll get into some other details. That's the round that you can see in front of you. I actually had these 2 bullets. Now, what they are, I'll get them out of the road so you can actually see them. 2 bullets. They're actually the same bullet. When in my testing, the limited testing I've done, like I said, we'd shot the main ones we'd ended up with was they did a little bit with the cutting edge in a 416 grain and a 444 grains, both fairly consistent, but both not very efficient at flying through the air. I haven't got the twist to run a lot more than that, and I couldn't get any of the bigger lasers, the 500 grain lasers and things like that, but really didn't feel I had the twist to run it. So I wasn't going to try and go there with what I had. Being a 1 in 12 twist, I didn't think I was going to go there. So what I did was these 494s, when I shot them, they performed very, very well, but they didn't have, I should segue a little bit, I also had some 416 grain, 416 grain in the Lehighs, which were a brass bullet, which were a lot lighter, obviously at the 416 grains, but they had the bore rider grooves on the side of them. And they performed exactly like I thought they would. They're very good until they start to slow down, then they slow down a lot. Once they get out of their supersonic or the sonic cone, and they get into where they got traction on the outside of them from fluid dynamics of flying through the air. So once they get out to extreme long range, they then start to drop a little bit like they got a parachute on them. Not quite that bad, but there was a monstrous difference. And I've forgotten, I was shooting at 2,700 yards, and there was over 20 minutes of difference between them and a slower moving 494 grain bullet. But there's a couple of the 494s that we didn't see hit the ground, which would suggest to me I already knew I was pushing the boundaries on the twist. Like I said, not quite enough to actually run those. They're really 1 in 11 twist bullets. And as you can get away with it with a lead core bullet, I tend to find you can push a little bit past what they recommend as a minimum in just the right sort of, with the right bits and pieces. I couldn't get away with it here. I was feeling I wasn't going to get there. It wasn't working. But I wanted to try 2 more things. One was I ran a tiny bit more powder, so I pushed the bullet a little bit faster to try and get a little bit more RPM to see what was actually happening. I also ran a coating on it, so I ran the FastX coating on it just to try and once again gain a tiny bit more speed out of, and I suppose there's another feature that I've got going on in that is, as I said, the barrel had a little bit of running in to do. Both of the ends are a little bit tighter rifling than the middle. I've explained that before about it, but it was because we're using so much of the barrel. Well, listen, I won't get into the complicated stuff about that, but I felt we're going to be gradually gaining speed, as you normally do as you're running in a barrel, and especially a big one like this, you'll gain a little bit of speed. So I ran a tiny bit more powder, and the other thing I did, if you compare these 2 bullets, is see that one is a tiny bit shorter. It's 2.6 millimeters shorter. It's actually running 25 grains smaller in the way I shortened it. What I simply did was put it in the lathe and made up a little mandrel, put it in the lathe and locked the end off it. Now there was the thing I know I'm doing. I know that I'm reducing the efficiency a little bit by shortening the boat tail. It's not going to fly through the air quite as well, but I haven't got the real mass on what I was going to do that. In theory, there's some logic to the shorter, broader boat tail gives you, or shorter, broader butt gives you more stability going through your subsonic zones and things like that. That's a very complicated conversation, but I didn't feel it was really likely to be a negative there. And I was making it lighter, so maybe the lighter versus less efficient was going to balance back out. Well, no, and that was the test I really did today. The actual video you saw were the 10 rounds of shooting the 494 all set up like I just said. a little bit more powder, running just around the 3150 feet per second. They were a good 1.1 in their ballistic coefficient. I haven't worked it out exactly. What I was actually running was 162 minutes of elevation to do 3,018 yards. So very efficient bullet, and as you can start to see, we're really starting to tighten them down. They're not on it yet. You know, there's 3 or 4 of those shots that could have been a hit, but it really wasn't holding quite the group I want to see to make it work properly. But I got to say, it's getting pretty close to it. I can do some more work there, but it's getting pretty close. But the ones I shortened, there was 20 minutes more of elevation because of the change of shape in that boat tail. So now they were running a little bit faster, about 30 feet per second faster. So not that much faster for the lack of weight, but I equally only lost 25 grains. But when it comes to the big feature that we really saw with the things was the 20 minutes of elevation needed extra. Obviously lopping off that boat tail really messed up the efficiency of that bullet. So really pulled it down a long way in its BCs. So it was a fail. I also noticed, I haven't included that footage, but it really opened up the group a little bit more, which can be the conditions affecting it. So if you've got varying conditions, it's in the air longer, so it gets affected more. Which is probably what is it about, but it certainly wasn't a win. It wasn't a successful thing, and a fair bit of effort to set up and machine every bullet to exactly the same place and check weights and that sort of stuff. A fair bit of extra effort that's already done. And the big feature I saw out of it was that the 494s were completely consistent. Well, as consistent as what you saw there. None of them went missing. They all went out there where they were supposed to. It was holding down probably a 2 MOA group, 2 to 2.5 MOA group in pretty high wind. So how much was that conditions versus the rifle versus the barrel? How much is it running? It's only at 100. Yeah, about, no, not even 100 rounds yet. So, okay, you know, there's all those sorts of bits and pieces, but working nicely, and I think starting to turn into something that's really worthwhile as what we're trying to get to, a super accurate ultra long range rifle. One more test I want to show you, one more thing we're about to do. For those that aren't aware, a 416 runs a normal, it's essentially a necked down 50 BMG case. Runs that giant 50 BMG primer. Really a primer designed to fire above all else. It's a 50 BMG. So Browning machine gun is what BMG stands for, if you didn't know that, which is where the 50 BMG comes from. And so it needs to strike fast and, you know, it's firing out there. It's a BMG. So that's what the primer is. Which means there's a really angry start to everything with this sort of stuff, and I generally like to run the lighter primer, so I'll generally, what I'm saying there is I'll generally run just a long rifle primer rather than a magnum primer, even in quite large magnums. Obviously depends on your conditions. You don't want to do that in the snow and that sort of thing, but in moderate weather it gives a softer start, makes them shoot a little bit nicer. So what I have is some brass I want to try. This is RCC brass, which was a couple of things. First off, you can see very clearly there it has a normal large rifle primer in the butt of it, which looks tiny there. It looks like a stupid little thing. I feel I should be able to make that work. I'm going to have to do a little bit of R&D with whether I leave what size I take the primer hole to, or the firing hole to, flash hole, whatever you want to call it. To whether it'd work or not. That's another thing. That's something to test. There's another test that's going on with that, is that this brass, like almost all brass we all use, is extruded brass, where they take a billet of brass and push it and bash it and stretch it and that sort of stuff. So the brass goes through quite a bit. Even though it's annealed several times through that process, it goes through quite a bit to be to that place. RCC brass, these cases are actually machined cases. So they machine them. I haven't seen the process, but I presume they machine a little stubby case, which is a little bit of or probably a full length case actually, and then size it down to the size that they've got. They're certainly going to machine it to one shape and then do a little bit of pressing, but it's not going to be the same as the extruded side of things. So how is the brass actually going to deal with the force of dealing with something like that? Its life, is it going to split? Is it going to be better or worse? I don't know. At this moment, I can tell you I've neck turned it because it was very thick, and I've also trimmed it. And the machining I did of it, the brass felt soft. Felt softer and nicer to machine than normal brass. Nicer to machine doesn't mean better brass, it means it was nicer to machine. So as for what that turns into, we'll see. That's the next test that's coming. But yeah, that's probably enough of me babbling on. I suppose I'd say as a nutshell, the rest of it is functioning really well. I'm really starting to get a feel for it. The rifle shooting nicely. It's certainly, well, it is what you'd expect. It's half the weight of bullet. My 50 back again. That's a 802 grain bullet versus a 494 grain bullet, so it's not half, but it's getting down to half the weight, so there's a lot less spoof going on. I would say this is short of a long time ago. This is the longest shots that I've made with a fairly basic sort of setup because of the elevation I'm shooting with. At 162 minutes, I'm simply able to dial the scope up on the ERA-TAC base, and I've made some slight little cheek risers for under the back here. Might not seem obvious until I point out what I'm doing. I've got a couple little spacers that I'm running in there. This is all solid steel, which is part of where the weight comes in the rifle, make it shoot nicer, but that's how I'm shooting when I've got my scope down flat. I've now lifted my scope up. I've made a couple little spacers to go in there to lift it up, which means my head's a little bit taller, but nothing wrong with that position. And everything in the rifle, the chassis is strong, it works really well, really happy with the chassis. The guys over there at Dolphin Rifles, yeah, listen, I made my little tweaks down the back here, but really nice to work with. The action is faultless, and this new barrel, this Lothar Walther barrel, we'll see, it seems to be coming in nicely. But anyway, guys, that's my little jibber jabber for the 416. It's getting there. It's working nicely. I think we're turning into that sort of stuff. I hope I can get it up to the level of my Gibbs. At the moment, it's certainly, well, I would say shooting probably nearly half, probably 2/3 of the group of the BMG. And I think that's the nature of the less push. And it's getting there. We hopefully will be well, seeing if we put a hole in that steel. I don't know what's going to happen out there at over 2 miles, but I've got a feeling that these bullets might be able to do more than just dent it, but we'll see when we get there. Anyway, guys, thanks for checking in on us. I'll catch you next time.